Betty's story unfolds like a turbulent storm, starting quietly and building to an emotional crescendo. She begins by sharing her humble beginnings, an office job at a small company where she worked tirelessly since graduating college. Betty describes herself as plain-looking, a trait she believes kept her from finding romance throughout her 20s. By the time she reached her 30s, she was single, lonely, and consumed with fears of never getting married. Determined to change her fate, she took a bold leap and joined a dating app. That's where she met Daniel, her soon-to-be husband. Daniel, younger by 2 years at 28, seemed like a dream come true, handsome, tall, and successful, with a job in sales at a well-known company. Betty couldn't help but feel he was out of her league. Yet, his kindness shone through, especially when he insisted their wedding take place in her countryside hometown. Betty's happiness is all that matters, he'd said, encouraging her to invite many of her friends, even though most of his couldn't attend. Betty felt blessed, surrounded by loved ones on her big day, unaware that her new husband harbored secrets that would soon unravel her life. The first shock came one evening when Betty returned from work. She found Daniel playing video games, assuming he'd simply gotten home early. But as she prepared dinner, he casually announced, "I quit my job." Stunned, she nearly sliced her finger. "You quit without discussing it with me?" she asked, her voice trembling. His reply was curt, "There's nothing to discuss. Adults make their own career decisions." Betty was floored. Shouldn't spouses consult each other before such monumental changes? Her mind raced with questions. Why had he quit? Had something gone wrong at work? Daniel brushed her off, claiming his boss was incompetent and he'd find a better opportunity elsewhere. But his behavior soon grew troubling. When pressed about his plans, Daniel dismissed her concerns, retorting, "Man, you're so annoying. Marrying an older woman is like being with my mom." His comments about her age stung deeply, reigniting old insecurities. Yet, whenever Betty asked why he married her if he felt that way, his response was always the same, "Because a complicated woman like you needs a stable guy like me." The remark, meant to end arguments, only left Betty feeling more trapped. As the days passed, the true extent of their challenges surfaced. Daniel had no interest in finding work, yet he expected Betty to cover all expenses, including supporting his parents, who had quit their job shortly after the wedding, citing health concerns. Living in an expensive, high-security apartment, they relied on Betty's income for rent and other costs. "Betty can handle it," Daniel had said dismissively. Despite her protests, he remained indifferent, spending his days gaming or asking for money to gamble at the casino. Betty's love for Daniel began to wither under the weight of his apathy. She picked up freelance illustration work to make ends meet, all while enduring criticism from his parents for not earning enough. Her once warm feelings turned to resentment. Yet, the thought of a lonely future kept her from taking the decisive step toward divorce. Then, one fateful day, a chance encounter at the supermarket changed everything. A stranger approached her. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked with a warm smile. It was John, one of the few friends Daniel had invited to their wedding. John revealed that he had severed ties with Daniel, a revelation that stunned Betty. He shared that Daniel's decision to hold the wedding in her hometown wasn't driven by kindness but by the reality that Daniel had few friends. His gambling habits and habit of borrowing money without repaying had alienated many, John included. As Betty listened, the puzzle pieces of her husband's past fell into place. Her dream of a happy marriage had turned into a nightmare, and she was left questioning how much longer she could endure this facade. "The unraveling of my life with Daniel began with a revelation that shattered my illusions. It was John who first told me the truth, and when he did, my world tilted on its axis. Daniel hadn't just been a bad husband, he had been living a double life. While I believed he was out on sales calls, he was actually squandering time and money in casinos. Fired for his deceit, he had hidden everything from me, spinning a web of lies I had unwittingly walked into from the very start of our marriage. How could I have been so blind?" As John's words settled in, I felt an overwhelming mix of betrayal and relief. The spell, the one that made me think women over 30 were somehow lesser, was finally broken. For the first time, I saw things clearly. With a voice trembling from both fear and gratitude, I thanked John for his honesty and hung up, knowing my next conversation would change everything. A few days later, I confronted Daniel. He was sprawled on the couch, engrossed in a video game, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Daniel," I began, my voice firm, "I quit my job." His head snapped up, confusion flashing across his face. Then I placed my phone on the table, its screen glowing with our near-empty bank account. "We're out of money," I continued. "I've been sending money to David and Catherine, and you've been taking cash for casinos and games. There's nothing left." His reaction was a mix of despair and disbelief. "What? What the heck is this?" he exclaimed. His panic would have been almost comical if the situation wasn't so dire. "How are we supposed to live if you quit your job? We're already low on money." I stared him down, my resolve unshaken. "That's not my problem anymore," I replied coldly. "It's time for you to step up, Daniel. I've been supporting us for years. Now, it's your turn." His protests were immediate, his arguments feeble. "Isn't it normal for spouses to support each other?" he whined. "It's hard for me to work now that I'm over 30. But I was done listening. His manipulations no longer worked on me. When he called his parents, they arrived in a fury, tearing through the house as if they'd find hidden treasure. But there was nothing, just debts and broken promises. As accusations flew, I calmly explained where the money had gone and why. The truth only enraged Daniel further. "Let's get divorced," he finally shouted, his voice echoing through the room. His parents, surprisingly, agreed, dragging me to the courthouse to file the papers. As I signed my name, Daniel sneered, "Glad I won't have to see your broke old face anymore." Later, I met John at a nearby cafe. "It's done," I told him, relief washing over me. But there was more to our meeting. John handed me an envelope filled with the money I had given him. "This is yours," he insisted. "I only lent money to Daniel, not to you. You'll need it to rebuild your life." His kindness brought tears to my eyes. John had been my ally, helping me sever ties with Daniel and his toxic family. He refused any repayment, except for the cost of his coffee, and wished me well as I moved forward. The next stop was my former workplace. My boss and colleagues, understanding my situation, had kept a hidden bank account card safe for me. Their support was overwhelming. They even gifted me a dress and shoes to help me start anew. Though saying goodbye was painful, their kindness reminded me that brighter days were ahead. With my freelance illustrating career gaining momentum, I moved back to my parents' home, determined to rebuild. Meanwhile, Daniel and his family's fortunes plummeted. Unable to pay rent, they were evicted from one home after another, eventually living in a makeshift shack by a river. One day, Daniel called me from a public phone, his voice broken and desperate. "I've realized I can't live without you. Please, Betty, can we start over?" he begged. But I was done being his cash cow. "You regretted marrying an older woman, didn't you?" "Goodbye, Daniel," I said firmly and hung up. Now, as I look back, I see the lesson in all of this. There's no rush to get married, no timeline to adhere to. Whether you're 30 or 50, living life on your own terms is what truly matters. For helping me realize that, I suppose I owe Daniel a small thanks.